Okay. Can I get an action, please?
Mrs. Jordan. Aye. Ms. McAteer. Aye. Ms. Mildy. Aye. Mrs. Garber. Aye. Mrs. Laura. Aye. Mrs. Stevens. Aye. And Mrs. Wilbur. Aye.
Yes, there was one question that came late regarding the consent agenda, and it has to do with regular minutes from the February 10th meeting. If you recall, after we came out of the closed session, there was no action after closed session, but I did make a comment before the consent agenda was read, just acknowledging both Ryan Evans and Kathy Cannon for completing their doctoral work and passing their superintendent exams and that whole part. And the notes, it's listed right after closed session. I think the concern was it might represent to people that that was a conversation in closed session when it was actually an open session. And I think there was a desire to clarify that after open session, although there was, or sorry, after closed session, although there was no action items, there was an acknowledgement of before we start the meeting. Well, what I would do is we can do one of two things. We can pull the minutes out of the consent agenda and revise them and approve them next meeting, or given that this is a very minor change to the minutes, we could approve it with those with changes.
I think it's important to get them.
Right. Yeah. So just we'll just approve with the noted changes, and then we'll make the changes before we put them on the website.
Make a motion to accept the consent agenda. Sorry. Proposed changes.
Second that. Mrs. Laura. Aye. Mrs. Stevens. Aye. Mrs. Garber. Aye. Mrs. Mildy. Aye. Ms. McAteer. Aye. Mrs. Jordan. Aye. Mrs. Jordan. Aye.
More meeting dates.
Yeah, that we just had that as part of the consent
Oh,
agenda. So it's the time of year to redo the dates. What we already said on Thursday, so that's just the second Thursday of the month.
Sorry, I did. Okay, appearances before the board.
Now we have Mr. Evans and Mr. Tom Payne to talk about everything SC Gross, and without further ado, I'll just let them take it away.
Normally, Jeff and I will come in front of you and present and show you dog toys and jewelry and things like that. But today in our presentation, as we talk about what our students are doing at SC Gross, I think we'll follow up on what all of these things are, and the great work that's happening with our students, creativity that they're showing, the initiative that they're showing, the cross-curricular items that they're taking up. So forgive me for that to start, but I think what we're talking about tonight are really the ABCs of SEG, a little elementary in nature for sure. For those of you that have known us a long time, we try to stay out of that elementary realm as much as possible, but realistically, right, we know that our students are only 11, 12, and 13 years old. This is an elementary education for them, and I think over time, we prepare them for high school, and you'll hear that tonight. But we also bridge that gap between elementary and high school, give the transitions necessary for our students. And so tonight, we'll talk about academics of some of our students at SC Gross. We'll talk about behaviors as well. And really, when we think about behaviors, it can have that negative connotation. And I think really what we see when we talk about behaviors at Essex Gross is we talk about character. Our students are with us for 3 years, and our teachers do a fantastic job of working with their behaviors to make sure that their character is really what leads for them. And then finally, connections, right? At SC Gross, our students have wonderful connections back with their schools. And we want to talk with you about all the many different ways that our students connect, whether that's in the classroom or outside of the classroom. The first thing that I'll talk about tonight is academics of our students. I think it's important to look at our 8th grade class, and I'm going to come back to you in June, and I'm going to update this information for you. This is some preliminary data that we have from Riverside Brookfield High School. As all of our students register, this represents the majority of our students, but as our students register at RB, we get more information for them. So we're lacking about 20 to 30 of our students in this data, but it shouldn't skew it much either way. We typically do this at about this time each year anyhow. For those of you that are new about how we place our 8th graders at Riverside Brookfield High School, the first thing that happens for our students is they take a PSAT 8 exam in October at RB. That was back again. The students were able to do that. They then take teacher input and recommendation from us. Come back on that in a second. And then they also collect our NWEA map data. And so for our 8th graders, they know that this is a continuation throughout the year as they're taking map, that this data goes back to them so that RB can really take a look and say, okay, these placements are sound. They're going to be on their path for success. Something that we've struggled with in the past with RB has been some of the transition materials as far as taking teacher input and recommendation. RB has gotten better each year at that, so each year they've gotten better with that. We appreciate it, but there is still more work to be done on this. So Jeff and I will continue to work with the feeder schools in RB to make sure that our students are placed appropriately and that we have the information we need to help our students. Students will then have the opportunity to view their placements with their parents and then make changes from that. Off of this data, we also reach out to RB and see some of the students' placement and will advocate for them as well. Where a student might or a parent might not advocate for their child, they might not feel comfortable or they might not know the system. A lot of times Jeff, myself, and the teachers will step in to assist. So some of that preliminary data that we saw when we look at Riverside Brookfield High School's English placements, we see that 46% of our 8th grade class is going into Honors 9 English, 42.5% into English 9. When we put that together, right, that is the bulk of our 8th grade class getting grade level or above. And I think it's important to talk about that in light of the pandemic, right? We've seen a lot of inconsistent data lately. But when the great sort is done, as Dr. Wisniewski often says that the PSAT 8 is, and we start to place our students into their high school pass, we see that we're performing at levels that we expect out of our students. These are our expectations. We know that some of our students are going to need additional supports when they go to Riverside Brookfield High School or any high school that they choose to attend. We obviously have our interventions in place. I know Kathy Cannon has talked with you guys about those interventions in previous board meetings. But when we look at this English placement, we see 11.5% of our students are in reading support. Those students are supported through us as well at Gross, and they'll continue to be supported in those classes when they go to RB. And again, we see the vast majority of our students are placed at grade level or above in English when they leave us. Math gets a little more complicated. They have more paths, more tracks for the students. Those of you that have students at RB know this. You've seen many different levels of math that they have. Something that we're particularly proud of this year is we see 15% of our kids going to honors geometry. It wasn't long ago that Essex Gross had no students going into honors geometry. We go back 8 years, that wasn't a path. We restructured our math programs. We have very solid math instruction in the buildings, and we see that we have students achieving the highest level that they can when they go to Riverside Brookfield High School. Honors algebra, again, you look at that, 45% of our students are going into higher level math when they go over to RB. They're placing above what their core would be. Their core is algebra, right? We prepare them for an algebra or above. And when we look at this, we can see that 98% of our students are going to be receiving the instruction that they are supposed to, or above that instructional level. Again, something that I think is important is every student has their own path. We talk about that with our students regularly. So the students that go into these different levels of math, this is what's going to help them be successful in high school. Moving kids, and I think that there has been a past practice that sometimes high schools can feel that middle schools can say to them, no, put this kid in an honors class. No, you need to push these numbers. We don't do that with our students, and I think RB appreciates that because we know that these are the supports that our students need. When they're in an extended algebra class, they're still receiving algebra, but that is an extended period of time for them so that they can continue to work with that teacher and get the supports that they need. So we see that we have 12% of our class in that. But again, when we see the kids that are accessing grade level and above for us, I think this 8th grade class can certainly be proud of what they've done this year and in their years leading up to District 95. Our science placements, you can see 46% of our students are in honors biology, 41% in biology, and then 13% in earth science. When you look at this, again, you're seeing the bulk of our students are at grade level or they are working in an honors level course. Earth science is a path for students that RB was smart to develop. It's a different entry point for some of the students that especially are struggling with reading, right? So there is a correlation that you see often between earth science and those kids that are in reading support. But what they've done is they have structured a path for them that makes sure that when they come in as freshmen, that they're not overwhelmed, right? And that they can be successful as they move through their path. We are exceptionally proud of our 8th graders. They weathered a pandemic. School stopped for them in 6th grade for a moment, right? They battled through that. They battled through a hybrid model that I do think it's worth reminding that you supported, that at the middle school had in-person learning, mathematics, ELA, and science, right? We took that core, we knew to keep that in person, and you see the results bore themselves out here in what our students have done. And again, I think that every student has a path that they need to be on. Whatever path they're on, we support them in that, and so will RB, but we're exceptionally proud of the work that they've done with their academic prowess this year. What Jeff's going to talk with you guys about is, I've talked with you about the core. Jeff's going to talk to you about some of those specials, right, that they call them here at Brook Park, or what we've traditionally called at elective classes, and some of the exciting changes that will come for our students here at Brooks.
So we're going to look at the new model we're going to move into with our electives or our explore classes. And we're going to start by going backwards a little bit to look at kind of the path of the last few years. And so if we look at 2019 and before, we had a model where electives would rotate on a semester basis. And so our students every 18 weeks would change elective. And at that time, they had the opportunity to choose band and or Spanish, which was great. And I think we saw a lot of good things that came out of this model. It was something that we had for a number of years. A couple things that we wanted to improve on and had some time to try things out in the last couple of years. Number one is those students who elect to take band and Spanish didn't have the opportunity to take STEAM, art, music, family, and consumer skills. As you all know, we have, I think, the best STEAM space in the state. I'm not just saying it because our architect is here, but we felt like that was something that was missing for our students that challenged themselves and took band and Spanish, and so we wanted to change that. Another thing that we thought was missing is in this previous model, we had about 50% of our students taking Spanish for 2.5 years. The other 50% of students either took one semester or less of Spanish in their time, and that was something that we definitely wanted to target. So we'll come back to those as we get into what we're at now. A quick look back in the past, Ryan talked about our year of blended learning. During that time, our electives were fully remote, so students had the opportunity to take Spanish and take band. It was in a remote setting. As you see here, we've had band concerts that have been outside. We've had band that's been moved to before and after school, and so we've adapted. And I think our teachers have done a great job, but we're also excited to move back into a more normal setting. The current model that we're in right now, we rotate every 5 weeks, and I think we've learned a lot through that. And I think students being exposed to every elective is something that we've been excited about. There have been some challenges. I think for one, band has been to before and after school, which isn't ideal. Additionally, with a rotation every 5 weeks, it's a little bit hard to dive deeper into certain things, especially Spanish, and have time. So again, I think when we look at where we're going in the future, we had a long time of the semester model. We had the ability to experiment a little bit in the last few years. And I think, what we were able to do is create something that we were able to kind of hit all of those needs that we were looking for. So moving forward, we're going to move into a trimester model. Students will rotate every 12 weeks. And we felt like that time period was kind of a nice blend in between the 5 weeks and the 18 weeks. We give students the opportunity to be in STEAM, art, facts, Spanish, music, as opposed to having to choose. So we're bringing band back during the day, but we're also exposing more students to Spanish in this model. I mentioned initially, right, it was 50% of students who, over the course of their time at SC Gross, had 2.5 years of Spanish. In this new model, we're going to have about 85% of our students get 2 years of Spanish. So it is something that we're excited about. We're bringing band back into the day. And again, all of our students now have access to those opportunities like STEAM and art and music, even if they are in band and Spanish. So we are excited, and we're able to use some things in the last few years to blend this into something good moving forward. This is something, so we're going to move, Ryan talked about the ABCs, we're going to move into behavior, character here. This is something that Ryan and I think are both really excited about. There was a quote that one of our students' parents had said early on in the year, and she's a teacher in a different district. She said, it's almost like you have to teach kids how to be human again, as they move through such a strange 18 months of schooling experience. And now it was more social and more normal, but for a lot of students, it wasn't. And so what we decided to do in late September, early October was to explicitly teach really important skills, life skills that we knew our students needed practice in, and we needed to really spend time teaching it. So the picture at the bottom is our cafeteria. So in the cafeteria, we've got the 7 characteristics of a warrior. And so we say, to be a warrior means you're empathetic, you're loyal, you're determined. And so what we've decided to do within this Be a Warrior campaign is through each phase, target a different behavior. So we started back in October with respect, and we felt like in a short period of time, it was tangible, that we could see a difference in our students as we explained, this is what hallway behavior looks like, and this is what classroom behavior looks like. And this is how we're treating our teachers and our peers. And so through all of these things, through reward, through partnering with our PTO for gift cards, through partnering with local businesses like Bill's Place and Paisans, we've really seen a really positive impact through this. So in the first 2 phases alone, we gave out over 17,000 tickets. And so what that means is if our focus is respect, and we see an example of a student showing respect to a peer and to a teacher, that student gets a ticket. And so that ticket then serves in a competition fashion where our homerooms are competing against each other. They're in the most tickets, and then individual students are gaining slices of pizza or a gift card in lunch every Friday. Ryan is pulling a name out or pulling multiple names out. And so again, our students have bought in, which obviously was the goal to begin with, but I think we're seeing some really some great benefits, especially in a year that we're trying to reintroduce and help with character along with that. I'm going to move into extracurriculars, our sports and our clubs. It says on the top, it involves students, connected students. This is something that we've always been passionate about. I think to think of our veteran board members, if you remember, I think it's 4 or 5 years ago now that the model changed, and it came from a board initiative of a teacher can start a club as long as they have 10 students who are interested. And through that model, we've really seen Our offerings increase. We've seen them customized to students. Students will come to a teacher and say, hey, I'm really interested in this. Would you think about sponsoring it? The next trimester, that is up and running. Kids are involved. And so I think that's had a huge impact in increasing our numbers, increasing our offerings. Over 80% are involved in at least one extracurricular. And so when we look at our sports teams here, we are back, after over a year hiatus of interscholastic competition within our conference. We're back in a very formal setting. So we've had limited crowd sizes, but otherwise our competitions are happening, our games are happening, practices are happening. We finished our soccer, both of our basketball seasons, our girls volleyball season. We're now into boys volleyball. And obviously we know it's not about wins and losses in middle school, but we've had a lot of success. And so if our Warriors are watching, hopefully they stay humble on the Zoom. Our 7th grade team hasn't lost a game. Our 7th graders overall haven't lost a game all year long. So that's soccer, which is co-ed, girls volleyball, boys basketball, girls volleyball. And now we've only played one game in the boys volleyball season, but 40-0 for our 6th and 7th graders, which is
We're
pretty.
not keeping track of progress. We're 40.
So a lot of success, again, a great opportunity. I know our kids have obviously been excited to get those things back as well. When we look at our clubs, and I mentioned again, when the board moved to that different model about 4 years ago, we really saw our numbers increase. We saw our offerings diversify, which was great. Some upcoming things that we have, our 3rd trimester just started, so we have a new group of clubs that are running. The musical, our spring band performance, which will be inside again and very normal, for lack of a better term, but a lot of great things coming up. We're in boys volleyball now, and then we'll finish with our boys and girls cross country. Before I turn it over back to Ryan, just some pictures for us of different clubs and activities that we have. Shout out to our PTO who sponsored our Fall Fest. We have a dance, a social coming up in the spring as well. Our PTO also purchased the books for our book club, and so obviously we appreciate their relationship with us and know that they support our students financially in a lot of ways. So.
We continue to look at this, the geography, the teachers that you see there, they ran that because they wanted the kids to have that. There's no stipend involved with that. They just thought this will be a great thing for kids to bring back for them. They did it. Connection with the community, the Let's Win program that's in partnership with Proviso Mental Health the township. They provide the funding. It's a partnership between our school and the Brookfield Police Department, where we have students do all sorts of activities. It's not about a connection with the police department. It's a connection with the community. And to have many kids involved in that, it can be anywhere between 30 to 40 students at a time. We're proud to have that program. Our Student Action Council runs our Spirit Weeks throughout the year. If you drive past the sign, you see every day, we're not taking it down. They designed that. It says be kind. I think that is something that all of us can take away right now. But this is the connection that we talk about, right? How do you connect with students? How do you connect with your community? And one of the ways that we've done it, maybe you've read the article Bob wrote in the Landmark here about our inquiry and innovation class that we were able to experiment with this year. But if you weren't, what inquiry and innovation is for our students, and it really has worked more into a community service project-based class for students. But they are coming up in their 5-week rotation with some sort of project that they think would make their community a better place. Again, we go back to behavior, that's character, right? They're gaining that characteristic of I am going to be giving to others. Then they're going to design, what is that project going to be? What's that focus going to be that I'm going to pick my community to make it better? And as of right now in the rotations, we've helped St. Jude's Hospital. Sarah's in a group of really dedicated girls. We're able to get a feminine hygiene product tried going in the last rotation. And Sarah's in for women. It was the largest donation they had ever received from our girls and what they did. And we were just so proud of them. They're writing notes to the United States military. Tomorrow, the Cantata, the senior living facility, is going to have a prom that our students designed. It's going to be 50s based. They've got all the centerpieces they made. They picked the music for it. They have cutouts that people can take. They just above and beyond with what they thought about what can we do for someone else in our community. The stuff that you see here, the necklaces, the keychains are going to be fun, or not the keychains, the phone chains are funding St. Jude's Hospital. That's on the left there. On the right is jewelry that the students made to support Magnificent Mutt's Dog Rescue. They also decided that they would do a t-shirt collection, and they have made dog toys for those foster dogs. So again, what are they doing? They are finding ways to impact others. They are finding ways to impact their community. And that is what we're trying to raise. You can take the academics. We know we're hitting that. Where are we lacking? We need to make sure that our students leave us not just as good students, but good citizens, right? And this is the start of it. This will find its place in our rotation next year as well. So this is not going to disappear as we change our model. We'll still incorporate this, and then we will look to start blending this into our social studies classes in the future, because this is obviously something that we see as character and citizen development. You can have that there in social studies. When we put it all together, when we put behavior, we put academics, and we put the connection piece together, we get our Scotty Award winner. You're going to get to meet Maribel in May, is it? Typically our Scotty Award winners come, but her and I were talking the other day after I had presented her with the Scotty Award, which is the School Citizen of the Year Award that West 40, our Regional Office of Education, gives. We chose Maribel as our winner. And as we started talking, I couldn't help but say, like, this is everything that we're going to talk about tonight, epitomized. This is her words. This is her speech in just one night. She put this together. This is her experience at SE Gross. This is how she lives the academics, the behavior, and the connection. So I'd like you to hear from Maribel. Hopefully our sound's working here.
Hi, I'm Maribel Lopreski. I'm so grateful to have received the Scotty Award this year. As a fifth grader at Everett Park, I was terrified of transitioning to middle school. Little did I know that my experience at SE Gross would be so rich and fulfilling. Middle school began with robots, speech drama performances, and silhouette presentations. I was wrapped up in the magical clock of sixth grade. But then the pandemic hit. My peers and I were exposed to a new way of learning, and not necessarily by choice. Still, my desire to learn was unwavering. As a fully remote student, I was able to maintain a consistent schedule and form close relationships with my teachers. My teachers inspired me despite the challenges of the pandemic. The energy of the classroom was so powerful it transcended through my phone screen. I thank them for that. Now that I'm back in person, I realize how valuable relationships between teachers and students are. 8th grade has been the most rewarding year of my academic career as of yet. And I know the memories I've made will stick with me forever. SE Gross has given me, as well as many others, the opportunity to thrive no matter what. In 4 years, and my little brother attends SE Gross, I'm confident he will have the same positive experience. Thank you.
When I presented the award to Maribel, she stopped me as I was giving her flowers and the award and said, "Mr. Evans, can I address my classroom?" And I was like, because I gave it to her class, and I was like, "Yeah, sure, go ahead, feel free." And she said, I want my classmates to know that so many of you could have gotten this. This is a wonderful group. And our teachers feel that as well, right? The teachers nominate this student. And it was a very tough choice out of this 8th grade group to find that person that was going to be our School Citizen of the Year. But in doing that speech, she probably rose to the level, right, where that humbleness pushes her over the top. But she is living those ABCs that we talk about. We think that's so important. Dr. Kozlowski always says, you know, when we're doing these presentations, just keep music out of it. I can't keep music out of it. I have a musical for you now as well. And it goes along with the great work that's happened inside of the classroom, how creative and passionate our students are. And our band teachers this year, Ms. Pilson and Melody, have taken over our music classes, right? Our music teacher, Mrs. Hendrickson, is working in the I&I program with our students there. And our band teachers have elevated music to a new level. Our students are creating music videos. They're going through so many different genres of music. And one of our students, Michaela Hogue, she's a 7th grader. She wrote a song about Brookfield. She put it to pictures. She recruited her aunt and uncle to sing for her. And in my opinion, blew it out of the water. And so I wanted to, as our conclusion tonight, share with you all that amazing work that's happening at Essex, what our students are doing. And so we'll end with,
Hi, I'm Mirabella
we'll
Presky.
end with
I'm so
Michaela here. Her music video is I Love Brookfield. And so it's pretty exciting, and she did a fantastic job, and she was excited to hear that it was used tonight.
I can show you Brookfield, all the corners and turns. Tell me, neighbor, now, isn't this a great place to reside? I can open your eyes, take you wonder by wonder, see one thing and another. Just please don't run and hide. I love Brookfield. The corners is the first of you. From Beach Avenue, to Bastions too. I sound your little
I
line.
love Brookfield, the world-class famous Brookfield Zoo. So many animals, dolphins and frogs, giraffes, zebras, leopards, and wild
Let's see
dogs.
what more there is in
Indescribable, lovely, so refreshing and dirty, and the sun pumps beeping round. I love your feet. A brand new library, filled with so many books you can read. I can't wait to do the activity.
Let me share this splendid time with you. No Brookfield, it's where to be, super place for you and me.
Again, I think that we, for so long, have focused on what's the next thing that we do because of the pandemic. How do we get to the next phase? What are we going to do for our students? This is what our students are doing on a daily basis in our schools at SC Gross. And we burst with proudness for that. And really appreciate the fact that we got the time to share a lot of that with you tonight. The staff has done an amazing job over the course of the last 3 years, leading that, making sure that the learning that we expect for our students is happening. I think you got to see glimpses of that tonight. We appreciate your support, everything you've done to support SC Gross, to support our staff, and to support our students. So thank you guys.
For next month, Ryan and John are going to sing to a video.
It's gonna be too frozen. It's really close in our house. We have to obey.
Thank you, that was great.
Oh, now we have.
Yeah, I think what we're gonna do is we'll just hold Mr. Steve Cashman to the first full business because they go hand in hand. So,
Oh, okay.
you know, we'll just combine those two. Yeah. Right.
Okay. Then, public comment. Communications. None? Okay. Quiet.
One FOIA from James, that went back and forth is in front of you. We've responded. My understanding is that Mr. Knott works for Children's Detention Center, is requesting outsourced placements, which didn't have. Don't know why. Wait, but I did respond.
Old business.
Yep, so, here we are too. So we've been talking about the roofing project, and Steve, I think you have some handouts, right? You just want to start throwing some of those. We talked about early in, I want to say it was September when, Rich came to the board. We talked about some different items, and the SE Gross roof is what has been on our capital projects list to do. So we started that process, which, one would think is pretty easy, but we have to draw bid documents and drawings and number of steps, and then go out to a formal bid. And we opened bids on March 4th, Steve.
Right.
On March 4th, and the last page of this document is what's called the bid tab sheet. And you can see the bids range from just under $1 million to $822,000. Our kind of hold, or where we thought the roof would be, was more in the 525 to 550 range. We talked about this about 10 months ago. And I think, as we are all aware, costs are escalating in every facet, and apparently also in roofing. So I asked Steve to join me because we've talked about 3 or 4 different options the board would have, knowing that we're over where we thought we would be with respect to the cost of the roof. And this project is a little unique in that we did a nuclear thermal scan of the building, which allowed us to know where wetness was on the roof. And we would need to go and pull so that the areas on the first page, and I'm going to actually turn it over to Steve in a second, but the area on the first page that you see in red is areas that have wet insulation under the roof. So those areas, the bid modification of those areas, essentially we got to cut that out, pull the old insulation out, put new insulation in, and then put a new surface coat over the top. But if you look at the red that's on this aerial that Steve has, you'll notice very quickly that there's very little red in the middle of the roof, and all the red is along the sides of the roof. So I'll stop there and ask Mr. Cashman, our district's architect, to explain why we believe those areas are wet and no other areas are, which will help you to understand alternate bids 1 and 2.
The roof, it's about 20 years old. It's a little over 20 years old. And prior to that, there was some masonry work done at Seagrove, so we can find the records. So they had issues back, 25 years ago. Did some repairs, but are looking at the problems we're still having, it appears that the repairs were not effective. And so basically, there's stone copings on top of the brick parapets. Water is getting into the masonry walls and it's getting behind the roofing. Some of these areas, it makes sense. We have wet insulation at low spots. So if there's standing snow or heavy rains, water can slowly get underneath the seams of the roofing. But in some cases, it's at the high spot, which is really unusual. And your roofs are actually at very good slope. Typical roof slopes a 1/4 inch a foot. These are a 1/2 inch a foot. So they're very severe slope, which tend to eliminate roofing problems. So we investigated with Rich and with roofing contractors and basically realized that to just do the roofing and not do masonry repairs is kind of a problem. So, the masonry work is about $150,000 to basically remove those copings, install proper flashing and drips just to eliminate the amount of water that's getting into these masonry walls. The roofing costs right now, I mean, all of our bids are just crazy right now. Over the last 25 years, there's a lot of really good data for school work. Typically, every year, costs go up between 3 and 4% a year. We've had some points back around 2000 or so where we got up almost to 10%. Right now, no one really knows what's going to happen. We've had cases where a sheet metal like this ductwork, it's 300% up versus just a year ago. This we're trending over 40% up. It's just been really challenging. This project that we're proposing here is to replace the wet insulation and then basically put a 2-part polyurethane coating over the roof, another roof membrane that then gives the district a 20-year warranty. And that's the company that does these thermal scans. They're able to see exactly where the wet insulation is. And when they know we've removed it, they'll then guarantee the roof for 20 years, which is a good thing. To tear off this roof, which this type of roofing wasn't available, say 20 years ago. It's a new type of roofing product. To tear off the roof would be at least twice the cost of this, because you basically go down to the wood gypsum deck and start over. So even your good insulation that's not wet would be tearing that off and throwing it away and starting over and replacing 4 inches of insulation, 6 inches of insulation, and a new membrane. So we were hoping that this was going to be, in this $500,000 to $600,000 range. And we obviously got, when you look at the bids, you can see Melcar Roofing went very aggressively at it. We're doing a project with them in Geneva, a similar project, a $3 million project, and they won that also by going aggressively, but they have probably the most experience in this type of roofing. We went with Rich to Brookfield Zoo, the Swamp, which is one of the displays there. That's the same type of roofing was done there. And they've been slowly doing the buildings at Brookfield Zoo with this type of roofing because they love the fact that you're not throwing away so much, it's less expensive, and you get a 20-year warranty. So we were able to kind of go there with the reps from Tremco, which is the manufacturer, look at it. It's a tough situation. My feeling is if you waited and chose not to do this, thinking that it's a peak, I've just never seen construction costs go down. They typically go up like 3 to 4% a year. You could rebid this next year and it could be higher. I wish it was less, but it's just things are trending in a bad way. If we actually chose to do a tear off, which was what was done previously and what is done very commonly in roofing, we probably couldn't even do the project this year because we couldn't get the insulation. There's a shortage because of COVID and the freeze that happened in Houston a couple of years ago. There's a lack of certain chemicals that are required to make polyiso insulation, and we can't get insulation. So a lot of roofing is really in turmoil right now. A lot of projects that we're going to have this year are not happening because they just can't get the materials. It's just a very crazy time in construction. So just to go through a couple of the photos. So that's,
Yeah, I think maybe the third page
Yeah.
that explain that, what the coping is.
so this third page basically shows, so these are the stone copings. These are limestone copings. Typically, ideally, there's a rubberized asphalt flashing that goes underneath that so that, because each of the joints is a weak spot. There's caulk and mortar there, but over time, with expansion and contraction will leak. And then the most important aspect, there's a drip, a stainless steel drip edge that's put in so that water, when it hits these copings, doesn't go down the face of the brick, but falls away from the brick. When they did this, there is a piece of metal that we can see, but it was cut flush with the stone, so it's not acting as a drip. And this type of drip edge has fairly been common in my career. So it's always been used. I just don't know why it wasn't done when this was done over 20 years ago, but we really think that's a problem. This is the modified bit roof, and then this person at the top right, that shows the application of this 2-part polyurethane roof vent. The detail at the bottom basically shows we would pull the sections off. We would install stainless steel pins so that the copings would stay in place. Several years ago, we had an issue with the netting at SE Gross with the heavy snow, where some of those copings actually fell into the courtyard because we found out they were not pinned to the brick. So we'd install pins and we put the rubberized asphalt in there and the drips on the inside and out. And that would basically then comply with industry standards on how to put stone coping. We did discuss at this building, we have a proposal to scan the modified bitumen roofs here. This is different in that there's not stone copings, there's sheet metal copings over the tops of these. our hope is when we scan these roofs, that we'll have less issues because of the way these parapets are. It would, I think because of the historic nature of SC Groves, to not have the stone would be probably, I think aesthetically would be a problem, and it would cost more likely than what we're proposing with the alternate bid to do the masonry. So that's a brief overview, but I wish I had better news to deliver.
So what I want you to know is Steve and I talked about, I want to say 3 or 4 options due to the fact that it's over the anticipated expenditure. One was to hold off with an assumption that people are really busy in the summer because that's when all school work is, and push it into October, hoping that that would drive labor down because they want to keep their crews on. Everyone wants school work done in June, July, and August. If we pushed it into August into October, which the polyurethane would go until about October 15th, October 30th, depending on weather. We thought we might get a better rate. As we investigated that, what I think we learned is that while it would be maybe more desirable, it's actually more labor intensive due to the amount of dew in the air that you have to dry and use torches, and we have a wood frame up there. So we couldn't use torches, we have to use heat to get that out, and we spend more time doing, and so it just becomes more labor intensive versus less. So that we decided was not really a good option.
Yeah, we spoke to the 2 low bidders, and they basically said they don't see that as costing more by pushing it off.
So we did explore that as an option. The other option that we looked at, hoping that we would be able to maybe combine work that eventually will have to be done on a certain portion of the roof here. If we did that and got a scale of economy, the problem is, as explained to us, is, well, you would have maybe less per square foot cost. It's still 2 sites. They still have to set up 2 cranes. They still, it's the organization of the crane to pick and put things on the roof. It's got to move everything from one location. So it doesn't matter whether it's 3 miles apart or 130 miles apart. If we're not going to get a scale of economy. So that's probably not an option. The only option to maybe reduce the cost, but it fixes the problem down the road, is to just remove the red area and do the stone work so that it doesn't leak anymore, and then come back and put the polyurethane on in stages. We're phasing it over years. I don't know that I don't believe that we're going to save any money doing that. We simply are not expending a large expenditure at one time. These costs, I don't think, are going to stop going up over the next 12 to 18 months. We're going to see huge escalations. It's my opinion. I think it's Steve's opinion. I think it's people in the industry's opinion, but it is an opinion. It's not a fact. So, but that would be, that'd be probably about a $250,000 expenditure now, and then 250 next. I mean, and then 250 probably would be 3 in the following. So I guess at the end of the
You'd only be able
day,
to get a 2-year warranty on that work.
Yeah.
Because you're just doing repairs, the repairs would be warranted, but the rest of the roof would still be not a warranty.
so knowing that we also have about 2 to 3 years left here before you need to do a roof repair, I think, as Steve and I talked about it on 3 different occasions this week, I said you'd be looking for probably a recommendation, but wanted you to know we explored other avenues. My recommendation is to do the full roofing project with the alternate bids, the propane and the masonry, so that we don't get leakage again. Do the thermal scan of Brook Park, and then start planning for a phased approach at Brook Park, because we have 3 years before the roof here is in much better shape than it is. And I think what we're going to find is that there's a lot less that needs to be replaced at Brook Park, because we don't have the copings causing. When you look at this red drawing, you can see it's clearly as a result of being roofs. things are joined together. So that's the recommendation. I feel confident making that. We have about $525,000 remaining in the capital projects fund from the original work that was done at the last building project. We've earmarked roughly $400,000 in ESSER funds for the roof. When we first started, thinking we would use 400 and spend 150. And then we would still have money left over to do Brook Park. That was the initial thinking. So we'd be expending all of that money, but it's not money the district doesn't have. And then we'll get the thermal scan of Brook Park and start making that as a next part of the capital plan. The perfect world, we would have been doing both of them at the same time, but it's not going to fit. And the Brook Park amount of square footage is a third less than what we have at Seagroves in terms of what has to be done. So should. Okay. Should. So that's my recommendation, and if you think that that is the route that you want to go, I'd ask you to approve the bid. You have the exact numbers there for the amount and the roof. And what I would ask Mr. Cashman to do is to immediately issue a letter of intent to Belmore Roofing. And he's agreed, if we give him a letter of intent, he'll order the polyurethane. That he has quoted, this quote has a price change effective June 1. They'll order and warehouse the polyurethane now and get it before the price change on June 1. We would just pay for the materials up front, and it would be about $20,000. Right, Steve,
I
$20,000
think we could probably see a $20,000 savings that you would
by
then
getting it
pass into the
before
district.
ordering after June. So getting ahead of that would save us $20,000.
Yes, it's a newer product. They started out, Huntley School District started doing this years ago, East Aurora, West Aurora, and now they've become so good at this that they do work in Wisconsin. It's very attractive to building owners because you're able to get a 20-year warranty for less than a full tear off. And there's also the advantage of not disposing of all this material into a landfill. So it's it's a greener. It's a very forgiving membrane. It expands and tracks. It's basically, and it sticks very well to roofing materials. They power wash the roof. They do a primer. They put this down in multiple coats. It has a grit that goes in the final coat, so it's not slippery. And it also is some kind of a bright white, so it reduces air conditioning costs. Like the new roofs that we put on this building, and Seagroves are white thermoplastic membranes. And they also reduce the air conditioning.
Would this company want to do the masonry work as well, or would it be an outside company they hire
It would be a subcontractor to that.
of them?
Yeah,
Okay.
the roofing contractor in the bid documents acts as a general contractor. So the masonry work, there's a little electrical work that would all be.
I'm curious why their bid is like $100,000 lower than the other companies.
I mean, he was,
Experience and the time it would take to
It's got the
discuss.
process down.
I think he has a process down. Like we, this
I
summer,
asked him that question during.
yeah. He went, we're doing a $3 million project at Geneva High School this summer. He is based in St. Charles. Because he's done it so much, he basically planned to purchase all the material, store it in a warehouse, not have it delivered from Ohio to the job site or anything. And he just feels like he knows exactly the best, most efficient way to do it. He also just feels like he should win these bids. He has the most experience. On that project, our first number we opened was $4 million. And then he was $1 million below him. Everyone else is trying to figure out how he did it. The manufacturer Tremco knows him because he does a lot of the work. They just know he really sharpened his pencil. You can look at a detailed bids, his overhead profits a little tighter. He just really wanted the work. He's done work at Sioux. So it was a project he wanted. He realizes that you have another building. So he's looking at the future.
You did not do the roof.
No, it's not the same product.
Oh.
It's similar, but not the same product.
The products here were done by National Roofing, and they're called a modified bitumen roof. They're basically an asphalt-based ply, multiple plies are done with the asphalt laid down. So that was done about 22 years ago.
How off are the bids in the like end result? Like, did he intentionally lowball this? And it's gonna be a different price difference in the end?
No, he's locked into the contract, so he's very confident that he can do this project and make money.
And also, you're seeing the lump sum, we see exactly what his overhead and profit is, what it costs to replace, what it costs to put the polyurethane on. But this, can you remember, is it 60,000 in contingencies?
Yeah, we have $47,000 in bonus contingency, 47.
47 plus we're holding another 2 and 5
Right.
or something.
We have about another 10. We basically put some unit prices in there so that if they were tearing up an area that the scan said was wet and we found some additional, they have an extra, I can't remember the dot square, like 500 square feet of insulation they owe us. And then at the end of the job, they don't do it.
So inside of there is
We always carry contingencies.
$60,000 that we may not expend in contingency funds, but we build that in the event we find something.
And we were very careful
Yep.
with it being, it's unusual for people working on a school to really find out that there's a wood structure. It's just the way things were built in the 1920s, so they can't use any torches. So it's a different process where they would be up there typically, especially for a modified bitumen roof, they would be using torches, but the chance of fire is just way too high. So it does, this guy, like when we bid the project in Geneva, we did an alternate bid if they wanted to start a spring break and find out what the dollar amount was. And all the other bidders had credits, like deducts to start earlier. He had 0. We're like, well, that's odd. Why is that? He goes, I've done this enough to know that if you go up there in the morning and it's dew on the roof, you can't do the work. You have to wait until it dries out. So he said, I'm going to just wait till it gets to June. And I'm going to just put all my forces in there and I can get it done quicker, more efficiently, and less cost to him, which means more profit. So I just think it's his experience which gives me a leg up. One of the bids, Marshall Roofing, they don't really have any experience in this. So we kind of felt like they kind of threw a number out there. So I think the numbers that were up in the high 9s were probably a little high. So I feel very confident this roofer, I've worked with them, they're a good firm, all their qualifications, people swear by them. Aurora, West Aurora School District, this is their roofing guy, their go-to guy. And they said early on, this is years ago, when they first used this type of roofing product, that they said, he was learning it because it was newer. They said they definitely figured it all out, and that's what their standard is for that school. It's kind of an interesting emerging technology with a 20-year warranty. And what's great is the warranty is not by the roofing contractor, it's by the manufacturer. And Tremco is a huge international, so they stand behind it.
Any other questions?
Pardon me?
Thanks for doing all the work.
Thanks.
The only
The bid for the special bidder for Bank of Illinois for a base bid of $821,400. Alternate 1 for $133,000. Alternate 2 for $17,850. Ms. Mackey? Aye. Mrs. Jordan? Aye. Mrs. Philby? Aye. Mrs. Garvey? Aye. Mrs. Mosquito? Aye. Mrs. Laura? Aye. Mrs. Monkey? Aye.
email, just so we can get Joe.
I'll be
Letter
in
of
touch
intent.
with them.
Yeah.
I'll send them a heads up tonight. So start placing an order.
Yeah, right.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Right, thank you.
New business.
Yeah, so as as is sometimes customary, this time of year, we start talking about staffing, whether it's people that are resigning, moving in different directions, or adding new positions. There are 3 positions that I think warrant discussion moving forward, and they're in no particular order. But the first one is an additional social worker for Brook Park School. So we have 1 social worker at Brook Park. We have 1 at SE Gross. We have 1 for 900 students. So how many should you have per student? So the recommendation would be 1 per 500. When budgets are tight, and I'm working on the Lansing board and hearing from 15 different school districts, when budgets are tight, we push that number up to 750. And again, that's a rough estimation. It certainly depends on the number of students. I mean, you can have 1 for every 250, depending on the needs of your student. So it's an arbitrary number, but it's a standard industry number. We've been operating, at 1 for forever at Brook Park, and we're now 1 at 900, given the things that we are experiencing in behaviors and the like. 1 to 900 isn't really reasonable any longer. So the recommendation would be to have the social work position at Brook Park. We also looking at our special ed population at Brook Park and kind of the number of resource teachers we have, not counting self-contained teachers, those are tier 2 resource teachers. Our caseload now is anywhere between 15 and 20 IEP students, and anywhere between 3 and 5 and 4 plans, 5 and 4. A lot more often than IEP does. What's that? But 15 to 20 at Brook Park is the caseload of Brook Park resource teachers. And again, 15 students, 18 students, if the needs of those students are really low, then 15 and 18 it's not great, but it's not awful. But when you start to get into 20, and you add 1, 2, or 3 of those students that are higher needs, then 20 starts to be not good. So the recommendation is to add a resource teacher at Brook Park that would pull us down into that 10 to 13 range. We still would not be 1 resource teacher per grade level per se, which probably would at some point is going to be the case, but we feel comfortable that just adding 1 position and getting into that 10 to 13, 10 to 14 range from 15 to 20 is more reasonable and warranted given the things that we're seeing. And then last, and all these are number driven. Social worker, 1 for 900, getting numbers down in Brook Park. ELL, so that would be English language learners. Our population has significantly increased. We've had 1 ELL teacher for the district my entire time here. That has not changed. We've been able to manage pretty well. I think this conversation has been pushed back due to the pandemic because we were in a hybrid model, so a little bit easier to deliver services. But it's probably back on the radar. We have 72 to 75, if you remember when we presented, 72 to 75 ELL students across grades K through 8. So, again, if you had 25 kids in first grade, 25 in second, 25 in third, manageable with 1 person. When you have 75 across the 8 grades and 2 different buildings and you're talking about travel back and forth, it's just not manageable any longer. So again, simply due to numbers in that program, that is not necessarily like resource teacher at Brook Park is defined, social worker at Brook Park is defined. fine. The EL position now splits between two buildings. I think it really depends on the candidate that we got to say whether that would be fulfilling needs at SC Gross and some at Brook Park, or it'd be all at Brook Park. And it just depends on who comes in and how we find that second person, what building they're in. But ELL is really, I guess, for us viewed as a district position versus a specific building. So this is under new business. Typically, when we do this, we bring this out in March. I'll ask for a formal approval of the positions in April. And but what I try to do is get a little bit of an idea if that sounds reasonable, because if it does, we would start posting to start generating the applicant pool now. You would approve the positions in April, and we would likely be done sometime in April, early May with the hiring process to be able to approve the candidates in May versus waiting until April 7th and trying to find candidates in May and June. So I've seen a lot of yeses.
He's the only three.
The only three we will need to have. That will be additional FTE unless somebody resigns, but that's not.
Right, that's a
additional.
new
Yeah.
position.
New positions will be the only new positions this year, or sorry, next year. Yeah, I mean, you know, the budget is tight, which is why we issue bonds. One of the nice parts about moving into next year is under a new public act. I think the name of it is Public Act 205. Don't quote me on the number. There is additional tax revenue now that the district will be capturing. Our amount is $176,000. We should see that should see it in August, but tax collections have been kicked back to December. So that's an additional revenue stream of about $175,000, which is going to essentially cover the cost of these. So while it's additional expense, there is a smaller revenue stream coming.
I'm just really curious, how many kids are on the social workers caseload right now?
Yeah,
That's
900.
I know, but like actually, like they're writing goals for it.
Yeah, I don't know that actual number.
A lot.
A lot.
For one person.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Says social worker.
Okay, thank you. And then the next is just the budget prep. So it's just not much here. Budget looks decent. We're in good shape. I think, if I wanted to play the crystal ball, I tell you that we're going to be, plus or minus by 1 to 2% of the expected expenditures. And I think we'll be within 1% of revenue over expenditures one way or another. We're going to be positive $170,000, negative 170. That's the swing somewhere in there, $340,000 swing between now and the end of the year, which is exceptional. Right, 1%. Sounds like a lot of money, but 17 million. It's just so we have the budget timeline in April. We'll look at kind of the performance of the budget thus far, and we'll do a little bit more formal estimations. And in May, we'll approve a tentative budget, and then July we'll have the final budget numbers, and we'll approve the budget in July, and then it gets filed by the actual 15th deadline. So right on time. There's nothing unique about the budget. There's no real surprises. It looks like insurance is about a 5% increase, but it's also a mechanism in the collective bargaining agreement to account for that. So should be in good shape. That's all I have.
Information and discussion.
believe we're done having COVID updates under inspection at this point, so. Moving forward. That's the only thing I would say to it is, as we monitored the COVID tracker, that's what our nurses put together. As an example, we have 4 students this week at Fort Park that are positive, but all 4 of them are in a different class. So as we talk about masking and things of that nature, we're not, as we expected we would not, we're not seeing that transmission in classes. I don't know if it was a week ago or 2 weeks ago, we had a virus outbreak in one of our kindergarten classrooms where some kids were getting sick. It wasn't COVID, and we had 4 or 5 kids in that particular classroom have a stomach bug. But that happens every year. So, but again, clearly tested, none of them positive. So we're in good shape, and let's just keep moving forward.
Okay, we'll move to adjourn the meeting at 9:05. All in favor? Aye.
Let's hand it off.